I recently unearthed an old backup drive from the year 2010. Curious to see what treasures it contained, I plugged it in and switched it on. Ah, yes, I was 12 years old and creating a film called The Great Museum Robbery. That didn't get very far, so I began experimenting with stop motion instead, inspired mainly by The Wrong Trousers. With a lot of help from my mother and one of my friends, I made a little 2-minute short about a ball which sprouts legs and runs away. Bad as the animation is, it still took an eternity to complete, so out of laziness I began learning how to animate on the computer, which allowed me to turn my terrible ideas into terrible results at an unprecedented rate. Now, animating was a lot of fun, but my obsession at the time was a little game called RuneScape. I played this for hours and hours and hours on end, and even made several music videos, which were very cool. I was particularly fascinated though on the rare occasion when something broke. This felt like a glimpse behind the curtains, and it made me want to know more. I'd heard whispers that games were made using something called scripting, and so one day I searched my computer for that mysterious term and came across something called the script editor. I remember typing some characters in and being really excited to find out what would happen when I ran it. Of course, all that happened was I got my first syntax error message. After a bit of searching online though, I was amazed to discover that AppleScript was mostly like writing in English, and I learned first how to display a dialog box, and then how to make the computer say stuff.
I am a virus muahaha,
which I found endlessly entertaining. After a while, I was ready to create my first game, Speed Reactions. So in this game, you have 1 second to press the correct button. Let's go. Left. Wah, I wasn't fast enough. Okay. Left. Boom. Jim. Back. Too difficult for me. Press cancel to quit. That's normal. So I made a bunch of these little experiments in games with AppleScript, the most advanced probably being Hangman. But the AppleScript language is intended for automating tasks, not so much for developing games, and I started to get bored of everything taking place in these dialog boxes. It was a pretty good introduction to programming though. Here is the Hangman script for example, and you can see it's got all the fundamentals like loops and if statements, variables, functions, and so on. By now I'd learned that RuneScape was created with Java, so of course that's what I wanted to learn. My first Java game was Noughts and Crosses, which I created with what I learned by reading some of the chapters of a book called Teach Yourself Java in 21 Days. I must have skipped some of the important ones though, judging by the horrors I found in the code, like an AI class containing 800 lines of painstakingly coded if-else logic. Thankfully, I was saved from inevitable insanity by a student from the local university who my dad enlisted to give me a few one-on-one lessons. With his guidance, I created my most elaborate game yet, the Ninja Test. There are a couple of different mini-games, but the fanciest is Pong, where you need to survive as long as possible against an apparently unbeatable opponent. The fanciest thing is that the computer player calculates the trajectory of the ball and moves directly to the predicted location. Pretty impressive. I take it all back, it's garbage. The next thing I wanted to learn was 3D modeling so that I could create 3D games. My first model was this aircraft with a very strangely shaped rear end. I followed up that masterpiece with a wine bottle and then a rifle. I just love the texture work on this model, especially on the back part because it's so clearly a picture of some floorboards. I kept at it though, gradually attempting more and more complex subjects. Here's my first attempt at a human, and an attempt at sculpting his head. This man has seen things. I learnt a lot from following CG cookie tutorials, like this one on creating a character called Kara. As you can see, she remained headless, and to this day I still can't make heads. Something for the next decade, perhaps. I also made some strange little animations, like this one about a dysfunctional vending machine in the desert, or this one about a mannequin trying to make friends with a robot he discovers in an old warehouse. During this time, I experimented with a number of different game engines, but I had a really hard time understanding them. Finally, in mid-2012 I came across the Unity engine and followed a tutorial by 3D Buzz on creating a little space shooter. From this, I learned many of the fundamentals like player input and movement, collision detection, and instantiating and destroying objects. The programming is done in C#, but since that's so similar to Java, I was able to create my second game without the help of a tutorial. By this time I was really into Call of Duty, and so I started work on my epic zombie survival game. I made some little devlog videos for this, which were some of the first videos uploaded to my channel. Hardly anyone was watching them though, which was a problem because I needed to get people excited about it so they'd buy it when it was done, and at 13 I didn't exactly have a huge marketing budget. So I decided to lure people to my channel with tutorials. The only problem is that I was very self-conscious about my voice, so I pitched the audio down several levels to sound more manly.
Hey guys, welcome to this Unity tutorial on how to create a Zelda-style health bar.
The video was about 30 minutes long and contained nuggets of wisdom like...
So when we start scripting, we need to think about what does the script need to be able to do.
You heard it here first, folks. The tutorial did actually get a fair number of views, but I then abandoned the zombie game because the code was a horrifying mess and everything kept breaking. Instead, I started this new project in 2013, where you have to build out your base and use different weapons and so on to survive against hordes of invading aliens. If I've ever been consistent on something though, it's not finishing what I start, and so I soon moved on to creating a slew of similarly unfinished titles. To be fair though, I do think that creating loads of little prototypes like this is a pretty good way of learning. Towards the end of 2013, I entered a challenge to finish a game and try earn at least $1 from it. So I spent the month making May the Best Man Win, a pretty unremarkable tower defense game where you compete to be the best man at your best friend's wedding. I put it up for sale and was over the moon when several nice people actually bought it, making it the first money I ever earned from game development.
Next up, Last Chance Supermarket.
This was a game I made for a 48-hour game jam called Ludum Dare. Essentially, you need to rush around with your shopping cart and get everything on your Christmas list, while also trying not to crash into the other frenzied shoppers. This was perhaps the first game I made that was actually fun to play, and I was super proud of it and made a whole behind-the-scenes video about my process of creating it. It went on to win first place in the fun category of the competition, and also enjoyed a brief moment in the limelight after it was played by a certain Swedish gentleman.
Well, that game's pretty cool, I like it.
Well, I clearly peaked in 2014, so I'm afraid it's all downhill from here. Infection was my first time collaborating on a project. I teamed up with Daniel, who did the art, and later on Tiago, who made music, and together we worked on a number of little games, like This Little Piggy, which is a game about making potato salad. By this time it was 2015, my second last year of high school, and in that year everyone has to pick a project to work on for about 6 months, and then present it to the school. I chose to start creating tutorials again, so I bought a microphone with a bit of money I'd made from the supermarket game, and started creating animated diagrams for my first tutorial on the A-star pathfinding algorithm. I followed that up with a series on modeling, rigging, and animating a character in Blender, and then creating a 2D platformer controller, and finally procedurally generating caves with cellular automata. I enjoyed working on these so much that once I finished high school I decided not to go study but just keep making videos. I was already earning some money from ad revenue and occasional freelancing, and I also then started a Patreon page where people have been incredibly generous in supporting my work. So in the past few years I've been much more focused on creating tutorials than games, but I did find some time to work on some small projects like Spirit Rover, a game where you have to write instructions to send to a little Mars rover called Spirit in order to guide it through the treacherous terrain. Or Splotch, made with my friend Liam, where you have to draw lines to try bounce a ball around obstacles and into its gate as quickly as possible. Then there was also Swordfish, a game about hacking, but in a very Hollywood action movie kind of way. In this last year, though, I've been trying something a little different, which is to take a topic that I think is interesting and spend a couple of weeks to a month researching and playing around with it. And then, unlike with my usual tutorials where I just show step by step how to create it, I've been trying to show more of the entire process, so the initial experiments, as well as the bugs and roadblocks I faced, and the random little tangents along the way. I've been having a lot of fun with this series, especially because it's given me the freedom to tackle things that are a little bit out of my league. For example, Clouds was a recent project I undertook, and I couldn't really make a tutorial on it because I wasn't able to get it to run fast enough to be usable in an actual game, but I think it still made for a pretty interesting coding adventure video. Well, in a nutshell, that's been my first 10 years of learning programming and game development, and of creating YouTube videos. It's been hugely motivating to have so many people actually watching and responding to the videos, so thank you all for that. And an extra huge thanks, of course, to those who've been supporting me in all of this on Patreon. It's been an interesting 10 years for me, with lots of weird projects ranging from being a fly trying to get up someone's nose, to creating a terrible little console to play Snake on, so I'm curious to see what the next decade has in store. Thanks for watching, cheers.